Welcome back to Marbella Now. My name is Nicole King, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to my home. Here we are in lockdown, but nothing's going to stop us connecting with one another and finding out what's going on and supporting each other in any way we can. We start off this week with a fabulous chat with our British consul to Andalusia and the Canary Isles, Charmaine Arbon. Let the music get a big welcome back to Charmaine Arbon, our British consul. And instead of talking about Brexit, which we have done until now, obviously there's a new topic that's taken over everybody's conversation, and that is the coronavirus. Good afternoon, Charmaine. How are you?
Hi, Nicole. I'm fine. In lockdown, same as everyone else, but very well, very healthy, and we're still doing consular work.
I imagine that it's just been overwhelming with everybody, just let's start with trying to get back to the UK.
Yeah, the difficulty that we have with this time of year, so you know, Nicole, I cover Andalusia, which is an enormous patch, but I also cover the Canary Islands. And the fortunate thing is that for Andalusia, this is not high season, but sadly, for the Canaries, this is their high season. So this time last year, there were over 400,000 British people on holiday in the Canaries. So you can imagine the logistical challenge that it is to get all of those people back to the UK safely. And, you know, it is difficult. We're doing our very best. We have very small teams, but it is a real challenge.
How have the airlines been during this? Because I can imagine most of them weren't prepared with their staff to even welcome people, the fear of the contagiousness of it all. So it must be very trying to get that many people back, and obviously at affordable prices.
Yeah, I mean, the difficulty is that immediately the state of emergency was announced, there were a number of airlines who shall remain nameless, who immediately stopped their flights. We have no idea exactly why, because the Spanish have never closed airspace. So the state of emergency does restrict national flights. So down to the Canaries, for instance, and actually between islands, there are restrictions on the number of flights allowed in and out, but that is only national flights. So international flights were not actually restricted. Obviously, if suddenly one airline or two airlines, as it is, stop flying, then all of their customers that were in the Canaries in particular, though some of them are in along the Costa del Sol too, have found themselves stranded. And it's not helped by the fact that the state of emergency extended to closing all short stay hotels, and that comes into effect tonight. So it has been difficult. I mean, what I would say to people is that there are two airlines in particular that I can confirm are still flying back to the UK directly. One of them is British Airways / Iberia, because they code share. And the other, interestingly, was Wizz Air, yeah.
I never heard of Wizz Air, and so there you go.
I had never heard of them before. I'm trying to think whether it was Monarch or Thomas Cook, but there came out of the woodwork a number of airlines that I had never heard of, including, I'm trying to think whether they're called Vamos or Wamos, who I'd never heard of either. But yeah, British Airways and Wizz Air are the two that I would highlight. I'm not sure whether Norwegian are still flying. I would say to people, just a pointer, that anybody that was or is an EasyJet customer who had a flight cancelled over the last week or so, you might want to look online later today or early tomorrow morning, because we think that they may be mounting a couple of flights over the weekend. The priority will go to their people that were their customers that paid for flights that were then cancelled, but other people want their customers have been dealt with may also be able to book onto those flights over the weekend. So I would suggest that people take a look at EasyJet, but it won't be available just yet. Their customers are being contacted by text message, SMS, throughout the course of today. So from tonight, you should be able to see whether there's any availability.
It's obviously a great panic to be a tourist here, kicked out your hotel, not know where to go, not be able to get back home. So in those emergency cases, having the consulate must just be so reassuring, but obviously, as you say, overwhelming for you. Something that I know that the local authorities are finding overwhelming is the particularly British inability to understand that whatever's going on in England isn't applicable to those who actually are living in Spain, and that the Spanish lockdown is much stricter at the moment than the UK demands. So how are we finding this to get the message out, Charmaine?
It's a good point. It's a good point, Nicole, because of course, as we know, there are lots of British people that live here who basically mix with British people, go to British pubs, not so much now, British supermarkets, and therefore are probably watching more of the British news. It's really important for us to understand that the Spanish rules apply to everyone. They apply to you whether you're Spanish, British or any other nationality. They also apply to you whether you live here permanently, whether you're here as a swallow just temporarily, or whether you're here as a tourist. And just to recap for people, the rules are basically, we are in lockdown. You are not allowed to leave your home except for in very, very limited circumstances. And in those circumstances, you are allowed to leave on your own. So that's individually, not with your children, not with your husband, not with your wife, on your own. And if you break those rules, you are liable to be fined. And I understand that the fines can be very hefty indeed. The circumstances under which you can leave your house are very simply to go shopping, yeah, as in food shopping, yeah, to go to the pharmacy or to the hospital or to the health centre, yeah, so for medical reasons, to go to work if your work requires you to go to work and you cannot do your work from home. And if you are going to work, you're required to have a certificado de empresa that has to be signed and stamped. If you don't have that, it is quite possible that if you're stopped by the police, you may be fined. And the only other exceptions are to walk your dog, and to walk your dog has to be only a very reasonable distance from your home. I think lots of people are saying 50 metres. I don't know where that is in the Orden, so I can't swear to that, but I do know that you're not allowed to go off and have a nice walk through the campo for miles and miles and hours. And something that's really important for a lot of our tourists or for our visitors, people might have family or friends that are with them that are only here for, that are looking to get back home. They are allowed to travel to the airports to get back home. So you're allowed to be out on the road if you are travelling back to your place of residence. I would say to people that if they're in that circumstance, they should make sure that they have evidence of their flight booking so that if they are challenged about where they're going, they're able to prove where they're going.
Would they be able to have someone drive them? As I understand it, they would have to take some form of public transport and not be driven there because the rules apply, one to a car.
My understanding of the rules are that you would be asked to go on public transport. So for many people, that might mean a taxi. Some people have asked, am I allowed to take my elderly relatives? And I do think that there are some exceptions, which might include, people might need to go back and actually look at the rules. But my understanding is if we're talking about minors cannot be sent in a taxi on their own, so they're an exception. If we're talking about people who are disabled, can't go on their own, they're an exception. And if we're talking about people who are very, very vulnerable, maybe an elderly person who cannot manage on their own, then there might be exceptions in those circumstances. Our advice to people is if you can, it's probably better to take a taxi, but you have to ask the taxi company because they may come back to you and say, we can only do that. We can only take one person at a time, unless you have very specific circumstances where they might have an exception and might give you a very large vehicle so that you're able to observe the distance between people.
You mentioned a Facebook page that I can't remember. Is it Brits in Spain, where we can follow updates and things from the consulate?
Absolutely. So the Ambassador Hugh Elliott has been posting messages, and the embassy has a Facebook page called Brits in Spain. People can go to that. They'll see the latest travel advice. They should be able to, at some point today, if not already, see the link to accommodation. So lots of people are really concerned that today is the date by which the hotels for short stays have to have closed. And some people are caught between, my flight's not due to go out until tomorrow or the day after or later, but at the same time, accommodation is going to have to be closed by today. Just to say that the Spanish government have always been really, really clear that nobody should be out on the streets. And what they have through the Boletín del Estado is they have come up with a list for the whole of Spain of accommodation that is exempted, so accommodation where people would be able to go and stay short term whilst they're waiting for their flight. So we have a link to that on our Facebook, Brits in Spain, and I know that you've posted it, Nicole, and there should be a link to it on our travel advice as well.
Hey, hey.
In addition to the fabulous insurance that you get with Línea Directa, being a Spanish company, they cover you by all the local Spanish laws, plus they have a fleet of tow trucks, mechanics, garages, hotels, lawyers, whatever you need. Línea Directa truly do cater to our expats' needs, and all we can say is yes, thank you very much. This is a really nice option to make sure we keep ourselves very safe. If you want more information on this, please go to their website, lineadirecta.com, or call them on 952 14 78 34. That's 952 14 78 34, because Línea Directa are putting your safety first.
Every evening at 8 p.m, I'm going out to my balcony, as is most of Spain, to clap and make as much noise as possible to show our gratitude for all the medical staff who are literally risking their lives to save ours. And it's not just the medical staff, of course, everyone who's out there, the police, the truck drivers, we're all in this together. So please join us at 8 p.m. every single evening at an open window, on your terrace, in your private garden, wherever you're allowed to be, but outside, and make as much noise as possible. I think you'll quite enjoy that. If you're the only one clapping, very soon others will follow suit. Let's pray that this will be over soon. Stay safe, stay home.
Tearing us apart. Poison arrows shoot straight to your heart. We can change.
For those living in Marbella, we have Blue Bay Banu. So if you're trapped here, I know one of our guests on last week's program, Tatiana from Russia, was exactly in that situation, had to leave the hotel, didn't know where to go, but now there is a solution to that. We're talking about Brits in Spain, Charmaine, apart from being the consul for Andalusia and the Canary Islands, you're also a Brit in Spain. You're a mum, you're a wife, you've got a beautiful and numerous family. How have you had to adapt for the situation?
Actually, well, I know this probably sounds a bit unrealistic, but it's been quite nice to be at home. So I'm now with the challenge of working remotely from home. I am going into the office once a week. So for people to know, the consulate is still open. The telephone lines are still open 24/7. The only thing that we're saying to people is please do not walk into the consulate. Please make sure that you make an appointment, because we're not taking people that just walk in. Yeah, we have to be aware of the safety of our staff just as well as we have to be aware of the safety of all health workers and everyone else in the nation. So my two youngest children have come back from the UK because they've decided that they'd rather be in lockdown with mummy and daddy, who will at least feed them, they hope. our middle child, Joseph, has decided that the idea of being locked in with his parents was worse than the idea of a virus. And so he stayed in the UK, but observing the restrictions on moving around in the UK as well, although it's proving quite interesting for him because he shares a house with 10 people, so social distancing is a bit of a challenge for them, but they're staying indoors.
It is, I think, a challenge and a time to adapt for all of us. And obviously staying away from our family if we need to, keeping that social distancing. I have my virtual family next to me, so close and yet so far. But we have to be responsible. And if we are out like you, if you go once a week, you have to try and keep those space between you, otherwise you just keep passing it on.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, all of us, for whatever reasons, we all have different levels of anxiety about the virus, and we're all at different levels of risk. But I would urge people to just be responsible and remember that it doesn't really matter whether or not you are worried about catching coronavirus or whether you feel that you would be able to survive it. We're all potential carriers, and therefore it's really important that we just observe the rules, because there are lots of vulnerable people out there in the community, and I, for one, don't want to be responsible for putting anybody at increased risk. So, let's all just try and be responsible about it.
Charmaine, 2 weeks ago, all we were talking about was Brexit. I feel almost embarrassed to bring it up. But obviously, issues must be there. I mean, is everything carrying on? Is it all on hold?
No, Brexit's still there. Obviously, most people are not concentrating on Brexit in the same way. We're not, to be fair. All of our efforts at the moment are going on our existing consular customers and coronavirus. And it probably is important to say that we're still here, we're still providing consular assistance to people who are not affected by coronavirus, because people can be in all sorts of other circumstances that still require consular assistance. There are still prisoners, there are still people that are in hospital, people are still dying, there are still child welfare cases. So all of that continues almost alongside coronavirus, even though coronavirus is, of course, becoming top priority. In terms of Brexit, what I would say to people, and we are getting a few messages from Brits saying my residency appointment was cancelled, or my appointment to go in and change my driving licence has been cancelled. My advice to you is don't worry about it. At the moment, everything is on pause. The authorities are down to a skeleton service as well. Their ability to respond to daily challenges is really quite stretched as well. So if your appointment has been cancelled, which it will have been, please don't worry about it. Once we get to the other side of coronavirus, things will pick up again. Just make sure that you have prepared yourself as well as you can to be able to move into action as soon as things start to get back to any semblance of normal. But in the meantime, really forget about it. The deadline is still December 2020. We're still a good few months away from that. So there's no need for people to be overly anxious.
Something that I really talk about, don't be over anxious, and I'm going to change the subject dramatically. People do, as you say, still pass away, whether it be from the coronavirus or not. Spain has a system for very quick burials, and some people like to take the bodies back for burial in the UK. Are there any changes with that?
There is a significant change, actually, Nicole, because one of the things is that Spain, whilst they haven't closed the borders entirely, people are not allowed to come into Spain unless they reside here. So I don't know whether your listeners or you were aware of a woman, I think over the weekend maybe, who tried to fly into Palma, was still trying to come on her holidays. I have no idea why anybody would be trying to come on holiday to Spain in where it's quite clear that we're in a state of lockdown. And of course, again, just to be clear, people are not allowed to go about their daily business, whether you're a tourist or a resident or whatever. But anyway, there was someone who tried to come in, and of course she was stopped. She was not, she had to spend the night in the airport and was sent back to the UK the next day. So Spain are only allowing people to come in who are resident or who are Spanish nationals. What does this mean in terms of death? It does mean that people will not, so if you have family out in the UK and, somebody dies in Spain, your family will not be allowed to come in to bury you. And my understanding is that anybody who is deemed to have died as a result of coronavirus will not be allowed to be repatriated back to the UK either. So they will either be buried or cremated here in Spain. The Spanish authorities have passed legislation that allows to speed up burials and cremations. So ordinarily 24 hours have to pass between death and burial, and now there are extra special measures that allow for burial and cremation to take place faster. This may be quite distressing for a number of families because, if one of your loved ones dies out here, what you would like to do ordinarily is at least be able to come out to say goodbye and to bury that person. And of course, if you're not resident in Spain and you're not a Spanish national, you're not going to be allowed to do that. So that is difficult.
Really a change round completely, but perhaps an opportunity for us all to, as you say, first enjoy the family if we're lucky enough to be with them, but also to reflect that we live in a very fast world and maybe see a lot of things could be perhaps done online and have more of a quality of life at home and with our families.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the things that we've been doing through the embassy as well is just sharing with colleagues any information that we've got about things that are available. So I know that I'm not sure whether it's Movistar or TV, Spanish TV, that have made available a number of programs, films for free. I know that I'm trying to think what they're called. I can't remember. But the audiobooks, there are a number of audiobooks that are being made available for people for free. There are virtual picture galleries that people are allowed to go to. So I think it's a really great opportunity for people to share those kind of links, so that so that we're not all bored to tears whilst we're under lockdown. I've been invited to some virtual exercise classes as well. So it's an interesting time and an opportunity for us to reflect on the way that we can do things differently. And personally, I think that we're really fortunate to live in the technological age that we're in at the moment, where we can do a lot of stuff virtually. I mean, 20 years ago, if this had happened, we would not be able to do our work. We wouldn't be able to do this interview. It wasn't possible. We have all of this technology that's at our fingertips now, and schools are doing virtual lessons. So it is interesting, and at the same time, the kind of reverse is also helpful, I think. So I am spending time with my children. They don't think I am. But I'm able to spend time with my children doing things that ordinarily I wouldn't do, because I'd be so rushed to go to work. I'm gaining 3 hours a day that I used to spend getting to work and back, that I can now spend at home. So whilst it's not great and it's not universally wonderful for everyone, I think those of us that have the opportunity, it's a great opportunity.
Charmaine, thank you so much. I'll let you get back to enjoying the family, let everyone start making a noise and get back to normal activities. Thank you so much for everything that you do. Thank you for chatting with us, and hopefully we can catch up again in a few weeks' time.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
My pleasure. Thank you.